You probably see the news talking about the war in Ukraine or conflicts in the Middle East, and you see the United States sending billions of dollars in weapons. This is happening now. But have you ever wondered why they really do this? In this video, we are going to unravel exactly how war for the United States is not just a political decision. It is perhaps the most profitable business they have ever created. We are going to follow the money trail to understand who really wins when the world enters into conflict. I know this might sound like a big conspiracy theory. A lot of people think they are just helping or fighting for democracy. But we spent the last few weeks analyzing stock market data, public company reports, and historical facts to put this puzzle together. And what we discovered and what we are going to show you are the numbers. We are going to show how, while politicians talk about peace on TV, the stocks of the biggest weapons companies soar. Is this peace talk we hear on TV just a smokescreen? In your opinion, what speaks louder? The search for peace or the sound of machines registering the profit from weapons? I want to know what you think about this. Send your comment. But let's check the facts. See what the numbers say. A long time ago, during the Vietnam War, while the country was being destroyed, the Colt Company, which manufactured the weapons used there, was making record profits. Something like $160 to $190 million, which was a fortune at the time. Now, let's jump to something more recent. After the September 11th attacks in 2001, the United States invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you know what happened to Lockheed Martin's stocks? It is one of the biggest weapons manufacturers on the planet. The price of its shares on the stock market skyrocketed, rising almost 900% between 2001 and 2020. The craziest example is what we saw with the war in Ukraine. While the United States was sending billions of dollars in weapons and aid there, the stock market in general in New York was falling. Most normal companies were losing value. But during exactly this same period, Lockheed Martin stocks rose 42%. Another weapons giant, General Dynamics, saw its stocks rise 22%. Are you starting to see a pattern on TV? Politicians sell the idea of peace, but in practice, the business of war is filling the pockets of those who invest in these companies. It's as if the United States realized that war isn't just a political decision. It is perhaps the most profitable business they ever created. Almost a startup that worked out really well. And the seal is Made in America. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the stock prices of these companies soared. They sell weapons to Israel, to Saudi Arabia, to Egypt. It's a business that moves billions and billions. When you start to research this, it even gives you chills. How did they build this gigantic war machine where politicians, big company owners, and generals all seem to be on the same team and everyone wins? Who really benefits when the world is on fire? To understand this, we need to go way back in time to the Second World War. Most of us learned that the United States entered the war as soon as Hitler started the mess in Europe. But the truth is, they weren't interested at all. Their focus was something else: commerce, buying and selling things. Their army was so small at the time that it was the 19th largest in the world, even smaller than Portugal's. But everything changed on December 7th, 1941. Japan, which was already a huge power trying to dominate Asia, launched a surprise attack on the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. But why did they do this? Because the United States, even without wanting to join the fight with soldiers, began to suffocate Japan's economy. The American people didn't want war, so the government used trade as a weapon. They cut off the oil supply to Japan. Imagine a country that depends on ships and planes but suddenly runs out of fuel. Furthermore, the United States froze Japanese money in American banks and, to make matters worse, started sending weapons to China, which was Japan's enemy. The Japanese felt cornered and decided to attack first. Then, yes, the United States declared war. And the country changed overnight. The factories that made cars, like Ford and General Motors, stopped everything and started making tanks, airplane engines, and bombers. Ford even managed to produce one B-24 bomber per hour. But there was one problem: the factory owners were scared. Think about it. Imagine you own a factory. The government comes and asks you to build 2,000 airplanes. you would have to hire millions of people, buy tons of expensive equipment, invest a lot of money in raw materials. But what if the war suddenly ended in 6 months? The government would cancel the order. All your investment would go down the drain and you would go bankrupt. Nobody wanted to take that risk. That's when the American government came up with the most brilliant and dangerous idea in this whole story. They created the guaranteed profit contracts. It worked like this. The government would tell the factory owner, if your cost to make one airplane is $50,000, we will pay your $50,000 in cost plus a fixed percentage as profit, like 10%. The main point is, even if the war ends early and the contract is interrupted, the government would still pay all the money you already spent, plus your guaranteed profit on that amount. The financial risk for the company was zero. This guaranteed profit strategy was what turned on the money-making machine. If you want this analysis, which shows how the machine really works to reach more people, then now it's your turn. Leave a like and leave the hype for this discovery. That was the green light. It was like winning the lottery for these industries. They couldn't lose money. That's what started the engine of the American war machine. The investment was so absurd that they even built the atomic bomb. With the end of the war and Japan's surrender, a new problem appeared. The United States had spent so much money that they now had the largest navy and the largest air force in the world. And the most shocking part, 40% of the entire country's economy depended on manufacturing weapons. About 70 million Americans had jobs directly linked to this production. When your job and your salary depend on war, peace becomes a threat. Politicians figured this out quickly. Keeping these jobs meant winning votes. And the weapons manufacturers realized that war was the best money-making machine that existed. It was then that a president named Dwight Eisenhower, who had been a famous general in the Second World War, gave a farewell speech in 1961 and gave a very serious warning. He talked about something called the military-industrial complex. He basically described a cycle, a clique, that works like this. Entering phase 1, weapons companies give money to politicians' campaigns. Now on number 2, in exchange, politicians approve gigantic budgets for the military. Entering phase 3, the military then uses this money to give billion-dollar contracts back to those same companies. And number 4, to close the cycle, when the generals retire, they go work as directors at these companies, using their contacts to get more contracts. It's a perfect circle where everyone in this group wins. With the end of the Second World War and without Hitler, what to do with so many weapons and factories? The solution was simple. They needed to invent a new enemy. The perfect enemy was the Soviet Union and the idea of communism. The United States used newspapers, books, and propaganda to make everyone very afraid of the communists. And with this fear, they justified new wars. A clear example was Vietnam. Vietnam was a poor, divided country that wasn't threatening anyone. But the United States convinced its people that it was a moral obligation to go there and protect the country from communism. They spent billions, dropped millions of bombs. In the end, millions of people died and the United States lost the war. But guess what? The companies that made the helicopters and missiles for this war made rivers of money. This cycle repeated itself over and over. In the 80s, the United States gave money and weapons to Saddam Hussein in Iraq to fight Iran. They were friends. Years later, the same Saddam became enemy number 1 when he invaded Kuwait and threatened the oil. So the United States invaded Iraq, arrested Saddam, and called him a terrorist. In other words, they spent $61 billion to fix a problem that they themselves had helped create. Then came September 11th. The new enemy, terrorism. The United States invaded Afghanistan to find Osama bin Laden. It took them 10 years to find him. And he wasn't even in Afghanistan, he was in Pakistan. But even after killing bin Laden, the United States stayed 10 more years in Afghanistan. Why? The total bill was $2 trillion. The country remained poor and in crisis, but the defense companies received gigantic payments during all those 21 years. Do you understand how it works? Conflict generates profit, and profit generates the need for more conflict. Now, the new version of this story is happening with the aid sent to Ukraine. The truth is that behind the news we see, there is this enormous and complicated system where governments and gigantic companies profit from chaos. This military-industrial complex isn't just defending the country. It seems to always be needing new wars, small or large, to turn destruction into dollars. The most ironic part is that for this system, total peace is bad for business. As long as this cycle continues, the whole world pays the price, with lost lives, destroyed countries, and stolen futures. The question that remains is, how do we break this cycle that turns weapons into money-making machines? Because until we find out, history will just keep repeating itself. As long as this cycle continues, the whole world pays the price, with lost lives, destroyed countries, and stolen futures. The question that remains is, how do we break this cycle that turns weapons into money-making machines? Because until we find out, history will just keep repeating itself. As long as this cycle continues, the whole world pays the price, with lost lives, destroyed countries, and stolen futures. The question that remains is, how do we break this cycle that turns weapons into money-making machines? Because until we find out, history will just keep repeating itself. And this discussion cannot stop here. If this investigation, which followed the money trail from the Second World War to Ukraine, helped you understand the world in a clearer way, show that you want more videos like this. Leave a like and leave the hype to make this analysis break the bubble.
El gossip a que